Hey, it's Phil from SmilingGardener.com, and this is the last video in the series I've been shooting for you today and sharing with you over the course of a couple of months on biointensive gardening. So let's first go back and look at the first 7 lessons that I covered. The first 2 are about how to improve your soil. And if you are building a new garden bed, especially in poor soil, in heavy soil, the first step is deep soil penetration or double digging. And that can be really useful to loosen up that soil, break up the clods, and especially when you combine it with step 2, which is bringing in compost in order to get that organic matter and beneficial biology and some broad spectrum nutrition in there. When I was shooting those videos, I also mentioned that I think it's very important to bring in the beneficial chemistry in there, excuse me bug, chemistry in there, the beneficial organic fertilizers that are going to balance out your soil chemistry in order to make sure that you don't have to keep double digging every year because we want the soil to take care of itself without it needing all of our intervention. At least that's my approach. That's not so much the biointensive approach. The biointensive approach is a lot of physical work to improve your soil and bringing in that compost. Apologize for the wind noise if there is any today. It's getting windy. The next 2 things I talk about were how to plan your garden in terms of what to plant. And in the biointensive approach is quite interesting. They want you to plant about 60% of your crops as cover crops, or what they call carbon crops, that are going to bring benefits while they're planted, but they're also going to bring benefits when you bring them into a compost pile, make compost, and apply that to your garden. So they're really interested in sustainable growing, and for that it makes a lot of sense to be growing a lot of your carbon right on your site. The other 40% goes 10% to vegetables and 30% to calorie-rich, calorie-dense crops, because if you're trying to grow a lot of your own food, you want to be growing a certain amount of crops that are high in calories, especially root vegetables like potatoes and carrots and parsnips and things like that. So we talked about that. Then we talked about just a little bit about how to help your garden be healthy. And the first step there was planting intensively, which means planting close together, and they use the triangle method for that, but they're really trying to get a lot of plants together, partially for the garden health improvements like decreasing weed growth and decreasing soil evaporation, but also because you're going to get a higher yield overall. And then the next step after that is companion planting, just planting diverse plantings together because they can help each other out in many ways. And then crop rotation too, which is moving plants throughout the garden over the years. So I talked about that as well. So I agree with most of their approaches. I would add some other approaches that I mentioned a little bit throughout the lessons and I talk about elsewhere, especially in this garden where I'm going for a permaculture garden, which has some different ideas. But I think especially if you're going for trying to get a lot of yield out of a small space without using too many inputs, and you're willing to put in the physical work to do that, but you can learn a lot from the biointensive method. So step 8 is a really important method that brings them all together that they call the whole system approach. And what it basically says is, don't just pull a couple of these methods and use them. Try to integrate all of them, otherwise you can end up with some issues. And it's true what they say. If you think about it, if you were double digging your garden regularly and planting really intensively and not bringing back that organic matter and nutrition into the soil with compost, you could deplete your soil. So that's one example. If you were not growing any of your own carbon on site and you want to be sustainable, that's not going to work very well because you're always going to have to be getting your carbon, meaning your compost, your mulches, from other places. Now, I think that there's something to be said for codependency, for us being able to rely on each other and help each other out. But if you're really going for self-sufficiency, which is a main goal of biointensive gardening, then you're going to want to be growing some of your own carbon on site. Certainly, it also makes sense for growing a lot of your own calories on site. If you can't do that, you're going to have to be going and taking from other ecosystems to get your food. So I think there's a balance to be had there between depending on others and growing for yourself. But all of these things, it makes sense to think of them all as a system, and that's what we do in permaculture as well. And I think it's really interesting. So when I first introduced this series, I was talking about this charity, Organics for Orphans, that I support. And so they're teaching in Kenya right now and to a lot of places currently in East Africa, and they're going to be expanding. They're working in conjunction with this organization called Manor House, and they're teaching this biointensive approach there. And I'll be really interested if I ever can get over there, which I'm really hoping to do, to see how they're applying it to the tropics and if there's any differences there to what we would learn in a more temperate climate. And I think that's about all for today. Down below I'll put links to every lesson in this series if you want to go back and check some of those out. I'll put links down below for some of the organic fertilizers I sell, because every time you buy organic fertilizers from me, I send $1 to Organics for Orphans, and I have a goal of raising $1,500 US this year for them, and starting some of these biointensive growing workshops in new communities. And yeah, I guess that's all for today. It was supposed to rain a lot today, and it held off, and it's become a really nice day. So my next step is to spray organic fertilizers and microbial inoculants in my garden. Today I already have a concoction I've put together of effective microorganisms and blackstrap molasses, along with a liquid kelp fertilizer and like an ocean water, a concentrated ocean water, for bringing broad spectrum nutrition and biology into my garden. And I hope you've enjoyed this series, and I hope you've enjoyed the summer. And I'm not sure when I'll be talking with you next, but hopefully I'll figure out something else to share with you soon. And that's all for today. Take care.